watching to see what you will do. Everyone's looking at you. Everyone's wondering, will you come out tonight? Everyone's trying to get it right, get it right. Everybody's working for the weekend. Everybody wants a new romance. Everybody's going off the deep end. Everybody needs a second chance. You want a piece of my heart? You better start from the start. You wanna be in the show? Come on, baby, let's go. Everyone's looking to see if it was you. Everyone wants you to pull through. Everyone's hoping it'll all work out. Everyone's waiting, they're holding out, holding out. Everybody's working for the weekend. Everybody wants a new romance. Everybody's going off the deep end. Everybody needs a second chance. You want a piece of my heart? You better start from the start. You wanna be in the show? Come on, baby, let's go. You better start from the start. You wanna be in the show? Come on, baby, let's go. You want a piece of my heart? You better start from the start. You wanna be in the show? Come on, baby, let's go. Well, welcome to Kensington, everyone. How's everybody doing? Guys having a good morning? Good. Happy Labor Day weekend. Yeah. So I know it's probably a hectic weekend for a lot of folks. The kids are starting school this week and things like that. Well, if this is your first time here with us at Kensington, we just want to say welcome. And we are so excited and super grateful that you are here. If this is your first time here with us, I will have an announcement I want to make to everyone that we have taken the step here to merge our information center and our starting point team together to make one team called The Hub, and that is in the center of the lobby. So if you're just visiting, you've been visiting for a couple times, or you're new, we just ask that we'd see you at The Hub after service. Well, something that Kensington does and that we are super happy and grateful that we have the opportunity to extend group invitations to people. We have a lot of groups here at Kensington. And these groups help you do a lot of different things. So this is the time of year where people are back from their family vacations. Like I said earlier, kids are getting ready to start school. And this is the time of year where we tend to ask the question, how do we further our faith? How do we go deeper in our faith? Well, one of those specific groups that we offer is called Alpha. And to tell you a little bit more about Alpha, check this video out.
Life moves fast, doesn't it? Every day there is so much to fit in. do you ever stop and think? What's the point of it all? Do you ever ask yourself, is there more to life than this? Alpha is a series of sessions exploring life, faith, and meaning. It's a space to explore the big questions, to say what you think and hear other people's points of view. First up, there's food, then a talk, followed by a discussion. Each talk explores a different aspect of the Christian faith, and then in the small group, you get to say exactly what you think. The aim of the talk is to spark conversation, each week unpacking a different question. There's no obligation to say anything, and there's nothing you can't say. Seriously. It's an opportunity to hear from others and contribute your own perspective in an honest, friendly, and open environment. Why not try it out?
Alpha is an awesome opportunity for anyone looking to jump in or have questions about their faith. Maybe that's you, maybe that's someone you know, a friend, a neighbor that you may want to invite here, but they have questions about faith. Well, you can stop by outside. There's a table right in the lobby that says Alpha above it. You can get more information or figure out ways or see how to jump in there at that table. Our discipleship team would be grateful to greet you there. Another opportunity we have coming up is our leadership gathering. It's a conference that we are holding here at the Troy campus on Friday, September 21st. It's an evening deal where we've got some great speakers, awesome music and arts, and it's just going to be a great time. So if you're a leader in any aspect, if you lead a small group or you lead a team, or maybe you're just a leader at your job or at work, you are invited and you are welcome to come out and bring someone with you to Leadership Gathering. We hope to see you there. Well, today we are starting a brand new series called Work Life, and Andrew Kim, our teaching pastor, is in the building. Give it up for Andrew. He's bringing an awesome message today. Hey, we've got an acoustic feel going on. You guys like it? What do you think? Yeah? All right, good. Well, before we move on with the service, I'm going to invite you all to stand up and greet someone next to you.
Hey, good morning, everyone. Happy Sunday. If we haven't met, my name is Andrew, and I'm so glad that you chose to be here, and I'm grateful to be here as well. And as Jalen mentioned, we are in week 1 of a brand new series titled Work Life, where we're going to be talking about what God created work to be, and also how we can do our best work ever. But so often when we think about this area of our lives, when we think about our work, we think of it as not something that we get to do, but something that we have to do. Which is why very few of us, if any of us, roll out of bed on Monday morning screaming, "Thank God it's Monday." Nobody says that other than maybe this weekend. Maybe some of us will say that. But that's not the way that God created work to be. In that He didn't create it to be this miserable and awful experience, but rather something that is beautiful and good. And if we choose to work in the way that God intended, which we're going to be talking about this morning, it'll infuse greater meaning and purpose into our work. And right now, we're going to hear a song that was written by a man named Ben Rector called "The Men Who Drive Me Places." And this song is based on conversations that he had with 2 cab drivers named Howard and Danny while he was traveling around the world. And as he got to know these 2 cab drivers, he came to realize that they were not only incredible at their work, but they were also incredible people who should be celebrated.
Howard drives a minivan to the cruise ships from Fort Lauderdale, and it's been that way since 1994. Does his business on a flip phone with the most obnoxious ringtones. I didn't ask, I could tell he's from New York. He spoke proudly of his daughter, and that this fall she'd be in college, that he always wished he'd gotten his degree. You could tell he came from nothing, built a future out of hustling. Somehow I'm the one you people pay to see. Oh, isn't that just the way it goes? You dealt a good hand, and you get celebrated. Oh, how am I the only one who knows I'm half the man of the men that drive me places? Danny showed up early, 15 minutes till 5:30, making sure that I'd be on my morning flight. Said he loved to fix computers, but that he can't until he's fluent, so he spends his driving money taking class at night. He wore a neatly ironed dress shirt, and he helps his kids with homework. Deep inside I couldn't help but ask myself why that night I'm up on stage, everybody knows my name, while Danny's early picking up somebody else. Oh, isn't that just the way it goes? You dealt a good hand, and you get celebrated. Oh, how am I the only one who knows I'm half the man of the men that drive me places? Now everything's not given. I work hard to make a living. I'll give credit where I think the credit's due. Maybe you got dealt a good hand, maybe you played it the best that you can, but I don't know how far you'd walk without those cards in Howard or Danny's walking shoes. That's just the way it goes. You dealt a good hand, and you get celebrated. Oh, how am I the only one who knows I'm half the man of the men that drive me places?
And I love that one line in the song where it says, I'm half the man, where Ben Rector writes, I'm half the man of the men who drive me places. Because as he got to know these two cab drivers, Danny and Howard, he came to realize that not only were they great at their work because they were honest, hardworking, and diligent, but they were even better people because they were men who were devoted and deeply cared for their families and had a great vision for their futures. But something that made him so sad was that even in the eyes of the world, that people saw him as being the celebrity. People saw him as being quote unquote important because of what he did. And as he says in the song, people would pay to see him. And people knew him and saw him. But these men who he considered to be so much greater than him, nobody knew their stories, which is why he wrote this song. And as I was listening to this song this past week, I was reminded of the fact that so often in our world, we tend to assign value to people based on their work. certain people in certain professions and certain types of work, we tend to elevate them and minimize others. But when we view work in the way that God intended, what we come to understand is that one type of work is not better than another. One type of work isn't more valuable or worthy than another, but all work has value, all work has meaning, and all work has dignity. And so as we continue on into our day, would you bow your heads and let's pray. God, we thank you for the gift of work. And we pray, God, that, and I understand just having conversations with people that so often our work doesn't seem like a gift. And it's something that we have to do, not something that we get to do. And for those in this room who have this perspective, as we continue on in our day, we pray that you would speak to us and really transform our thinking when it comes to our work. And so we thank you and pray these things in your son's name. Amen. And so this series that we're starting today, called Work Life, is based on a book that was written by a man named Tim Keller called Every Good Endeavor. And so if you want to know more about this topic, if you want to know more about how work and faith intersect, I want to invite you to pick up that book and to read it, because it is one of the best books in this area. But at the same time, before we continue on, I think it's also important for us to define this term work, because it's a big term. It's a loaded term. And probably when you think of the word work, a lot of different words come to mind, probably a lot of images come to mind. And so for the purposes of this series, how we're going to define work is that we're going to define it as any activity that we engage in where we expend energy to accomplish or achieve something. So according to this definition, of course, work includes what many of us here do and those watching online do, where we might go to a specific location, Mondays to Fridays, work maybe 9 to 5, 8 to 4, whatever it is. And during those hours, we perform a specific set of duties and responsibilities. And every couple of weeks, we receive a paycheck. But according to this definition, that's not all work is. But what work also is that for those of you who are stay-at-home parents, and you may not receive any financial compensation, but you expend a lot of energy and you invest a lot of energy to accomplish something. And your work is some of the most meaningful and challenging forms of work on this planet. So it includes stay-at-home parents. It also includes those who are students, who invest a lot of time and energy working towards a degree. And so all of this is work, and this is how we're defining work for this series. And as I was thinking about work this past week, I was reminded of the very first job that I ever had. And it was when I was 16. And I remember that summer, I so badly wanted a job. So every morning, I would look through the help wanted section or the help wanted ads in the classified section of the newspaper. And I remember one morning, I came across this one ad. And the very first line said, "Energetic and motivated people wanted." And I was thinking to myself, you know what? I'm pretty motivated, and if they want me to be, I can be pretty energetic as well. And then the second line said, "Can work from home," which I thought was perfect for me. I don't have to go anywhere. I couldn't drive, didn't have a car, and so I didn't have to take the bus anywhere. I could do it right from home. It said opportunities for advancement available. And I wasn't looking for a career, but I was thinking, hey, you know what? Just in case, why not? Said no experience necessary, we'll provide training, which was good because I had no experience. And then the best part, it said we'll pay up to $15 an hour. And more than 20 years ago, as a 16-year-old, that was a huge amount of money. Sounded like a great job. Can any of you guess what that job was? All I heard was blah, 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 blah. And then I heard telemarketer over here, and that's exactly what it was. Everyone's already, every service that we've done, everyone's been able to guess what the job was. And it was as a telemarketer. So let me ask you guys, how many of you have ever worked as a telemarketer before? Just by show of hands. Okay, a number of you have. And so I had heard, up to that point in my life, I had heard some horror stories of how telemarketers were treated. But I sort of put that out of my mind, and I focused on the $15 an hour part. And so I applied for this job, got it, and I started working. And let me tell you, it was pretty bad. And on the whole, people weren't all that rude, but there were a small section of people who were pretty nasty. And remember, I grew up in Canada where people are still pretty nice. But there was this small subset of people that I would have conversations with who would just immediately either just slam the phone down or they would say some terrible things to me. And so those were the people who stuck in my head and who I remembered. And so whenever I would dial the next number, I would be gripped with anxiety and fear, thinking that the next person would treat me like that or just rip me to shreds with their words. And so after a short period of time, I just said, you know what? This is not worth it. And so I decided to quit. Can any of you guess how long I lasted in this job? 6 months. That's pretty good. Thank you very much for having so much faith in me. I heard 6 months. That's pretty good. Somebody said 1 day in the previous service. Really, 1 day. I lasted 3 days, or more specifically, 18 entire hours. And I hated almost every minute of it. And if you're somebody who hates their work, you are not alone. And last year, Pew did a study, or actually Gallup did a study that actually found that out of the 1 billion full-time workers in this world, 85% hate their job. And that is an astounding number. That's just not in the United States, that's worldwide. So you're looking at 850 million people who hate what they do. And for so many of us, and for full-time workers, and for those of you who are full-time workers, you understand that we tend to spend more time at work with our coworkers than we do with our family or our friends. And so the fact that 850 million people in this world hate what they do is astounding and also pretty sad. Because all of these people are simply living for the weekend, as we sang in that opening song, or as we heard in that opening song. All of these people are just simply living for the 2 weeks off that they get every year, or retirement that hopefully they'll get, or hopefully that will come sooner rather than later. And out of that 85%, what Gallup found was that 62% they were described as being disengaged or not engaged in their work, meaning they were checked out of their work and they would basically sleepwalk through their day, putting very little effort into their work. But the other 23% they found were actively disengaged, in that they hated their work so much that they would act out at work. And one of the ways that they would act out is by actively trying to undermine their coworkers. So what this means that only 15% of people in this world enjoy what they do. Only 15% have a passion for their work. Only 15% will drive innovation and will attempt to move the mission of their organization forward. And when I read studies like this, and when I have conversations with people who hate their work, I always wonder to myself, was it meant to be like this? Or is us having to do this terrible thing called work the result of us living in a broken world? Because if Adam and Eve, all those years ago, if they didn't eat that piece of fruit, would we be just lounging around relaxing all day, every day? What I've been asking is it their fault? And what God tells us in the scriptures is that He tells us the answer to this question is a resounding no. Because God created us to work, and He created us to work with several important purposes in mind. And we're going to be talking about a few of them today. And if we choose to work in this way, it'll transform this area of our lives by injecting greater meaning and purpose into it. And when you look at the very beginning of the scriptures, the very first book in the Bible, which is the book of Genesis, what you see is that God wasn't just sitting around doing nothing, but He was making something, He was doing something, He was at work. And it says that in the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. Now the earth was formless and empty, darkness was over the surface of the deep, and the Spirit of God was hovering over the waters. And God said, "Let there be light," and there was light. God saw that the light was good, and He separated the light from the darkness. God called the light day, and the darkness He called night. And there was evening and there was morning the first day. And if you continue on reading in the book of Genesis, and actually if you continue on reading in Genesis chapter 1, what you see is that God continued to create. God continued to work. And what we have to understand is that God didn't have to work. He didn't have to bring about creation in this way. He could have done it in a lot of different ways. But He chose to work, which differentiates Him from the gods of so many other belief systems. For example, in the Greek account of creation, there's this idea of successive ages of mankind. And in the very first age, which is called the Golden Age, we're told that human beings and gods, they lived together on earth in harmony. And earth was a paradise, it was a utopia, it was perfect. And because it was, human beings and gods didn't have to do this terrible thing called work, because the earth produced everything that they needed. But when you think about and you hear that account, nobody did anything. Everyone just sat around relaxing all day, every day, and then you read Genesis chapter 1, where God was at work. It's very, very different. Very different, because God wasn't just sitting around doing nothing, but he was actively doing this thing that we call work. And what you see in Genesis chapter 1 is that work wasn't something that was beneath God. It wasn't something that cut into his vacation time or that he hated doing, and that's why he created human beings to do it in his place. No, that's not what it is at all. But rather, work was something that was beautiful and good, that brought him a great sense of joy and satisfaction. Which is why on the sixth day, it says that God saw all he had made, and it was very good. Meaning that on the sixth day, he took a break from his work. He took a step back. He took a look at the product of his labor, and he took pleasure in it. And we as human beings have been made in the image of God. And what that means is that we are a visible representation of who God is and what he's like on this earth. And just as God worked, we as human beings have been created to work as well. And just as the work that God did in the very beginning was good, the work that God has given us to do is good as well. And the thing with this work is that it's a part of who we are. It's a part of our identity. We've been created to work. Work is part of God's perfect design for humanity. And so when we work, we are expressing the very core of who we are. So work is not something that is evil. Work is not something that is the result of the entrance of sin into the world. But rather, it is something that is good and beautiful. And that's what we see in the very beginning of the scriptures. But with sin, what we see in Genesis chapter 3 is that sin entered into the world. And when sin entered into the world, what happened was that it distorted everything, including our work. It distorted our perspective of work, but it also distorted the purpose of our work. So that today, many people, when it comes to their work, the reason why they work is for that paycheck or that promotion, to please their boss, to climb the social ladder or even the corporate ladder. And if this is the reason why we work, the problem with this is that our work just becomes all about us. And when our work becomes all about us, what it can quickly lead to is feelings of burnout, frustration, and emptiness. But if the purpose of our work is to serve and benefit something or someone beyond ourselves, we're more likely to find fulfillment and satisfaction and even success in the long run. And Simon Sinek, who's an author and speaker, said something similar. He says that if you want to feel happy, do something for yourself. But if you want to feel fulfilled, which is a deeper level of satisfaction, do something for someone else. And this is what God created work to be, one of the purposes that God created work to be, for us not to work with ourselves in mind, but rather for us through our work to serve others. And in the New Testament, there is this book called Acts. And Acts was written by this doctor named Luke. And it chronicles, and in this book, he chronicles the early history of the church. And in one part of the book of Acts, the Apostle Paul was saying goodbye to this church community that he had started in the ancient Greek city of Ephesus. And in his goodbye address to these Ephesian Christians, Paul tells them the reason why he had worked during the time he was with them. And Paul writes, "In everything I've done, I have demonstrated to you how necessary it is to work on behalf of the weak and not exploit them." And Paul was a pastor and he was a missionary, but that's not the type of work that he's talking about in this verse. Because in addition to being a pastor and missionary, Paul also was a tent maker, in that he would make and try to sell tents in the local marketplace. And the reason he did this, as we just read, wasn't so that he could make more money and buy a better house and live a more comfortable life, but rather the reason why he did this was through his work so that he could serve others. especially the most vulnerable in his society. So what we see is that the reason why Paul worked was to serve others, and he found a great sense of joy and satisfaction as he did this. And every single year in New York City, there is this competition that takes place called the Operators Challenge, and it's also called the Sludge Olympics. And it's a competition to determine the highest performing sewage treatment workers in the city of New York. And of course, because it's for sewage treatment workers, it's held in a sewage treatment plant. And you would think that the men and women in this line of work would hate what they do and would try to find any reason to do something else. Because part of their job description involves wading through human excrement. But it gets worse, because some even have to swim through it to unclog pipes. And as I was thinking about this, I was thinking, I hope they give them really good masks, because if some gets into your mouth, I was thinking, now that's the bad day. Now everybody has that picture in their mind. You're welcome. And so you would think that these men and women, they would hate what they do. But as I read this article, I found that so many of these people, they take incredible pride in their work. And they found this extraordinary sense of fulfillment. And it's because, as George Massas, one sewage treatment worker, said, it's enough to serve the public. That's why they take pride in their work. That's why they are so satisfied, because they understand that even though their work may be dirty at times, even though they know it may be very difficult at times, through their work, they are able to help and to serve others. And so when I read this article, I started asking myself, why is it that people who are in high-paying professions, who have all of these amazing perks and benefits given to them, who are able to work in these incredible environments, why do they so often find their work so empty and meaningless? Whereas people who work in the sewers of New York can feel so satisfied. And part of the answer is, when the purpose of our work is not to serve and benefit ourselves, but others, we are able to find meaning and purpose in our work. But in addition to work being good, a gift from God, in addition to our work being a way that we can serve others, God also intended our work to be a way that we could worship and honor Him. And we're able to do this when we understand who we're ultimately working for. And the Apostle Paul knew this, which is why he wrote, whatever you do, work at it with all your heart, as working for the Lord, not for human masters. And when Paul wrote this, when Paul said this, he was talking to a group of slaves. And the big temptation for these slaves was to try to get away with doing as little work as possible, to try to set the bar down here. Because remember, they were slaves. They didn't like their work, and they didn't like their bosses. And so Paul, understanding this, says to them, recognize that you're not ultimately doing this work for your human boss, but you're ultimately working for God. And so what I want you to do, Paul says, is I want you to do it with all your heart. Put everything that you got into it. Set the bar up here. And it's the same thing for us, because this applies to us as well. Because when we understand who we're working for, it changes the way that we work. When we understand that we're not working for a paycheck, a promotion, to satisfy our own ego, or to please our boss, it transforms this area of our lives by infusing meaning, purpose, and dignity into our work. It just simply takes it to another level. And I remember this one theology professor, he told a story of a flight that he was on one time. And as probably many of us know, if not all of us know, flying these days is a terrible experience for the most part. It seems that that chair in front of you gets closer and closer every single time. They're squeezing you in tighter. There's long lines. There's no room in the overhead compartment. You got to pay all of these fees, and it goes on and on and on. And this flight, he said, was no different, because this professor said that on this flight, there was a man sitting close to him who was constantly complaining and grumbling through the entire flight. He couldn't be satisfied. And there was this one flight attendant who was trying to help him out. And she would suggest things, she would give him things, even give him things for free to try to make his experience better. But every single time she did this, he would just complain even more. He would nitpick about this and that, just completely unreasonable things. But what blew this professor away is that every time that this guy would grumble and respond in this negative way, this flight attendant would continue to show him love, kindness, and grace. And this professor was thinking, if I was her, I would have just lost it on him a long time ago. I probably would have opened up that exit door and kicked him right out the door. But she didn't. And this is the way she loved him so well. And finally, she was able to diffuse the situation and sort of satisfy this guy. And he was blown away by her response. And so when everyone was exiting and they had finally arrived at their destination and he was moving out the door, he ran into her. And he asked her, "What is your name? Because I want to send your boss an email to tell him or her what an extraordinary job you did today in handling this person, in handling this otherwise tense situation." And she responded by saying, "Thank you." But she also told him that, "I want you to know that the reason why I did this wasn't to please my boss. It wasn't for this airline, because I don't consider them ultimately my employers." And this professor's thinking, "You sure look like you work for them. You're wearing the uniform. You just did the job." So he was confused. And she continued on by saying, "A couple weeks ago, a friend of mine challenged me that when I work, to work with God in mind. And as I've tried to do that day after day, week after week, it's changed the way that I approach my work. It's changed the way that I deal with people. And it's really taken my work to another level by infusing it with a greater level of dignity, meaning, and purpose." And so when we work with God in mind, it changes this area of our lives. It changes the way that we approach our work and also handle and really serve and love the people around us. But this is the big question. We've talked about how through our work we're meant to serve other people and also worship and honor God. But the big question then becomes, how do you do this? And Dorothy Sayers, who was an author as well as a theologian in the early 20th century, and she was also a contemporary of C.S. Lewis, said this. And she was talking, in this quote, she's talking about a carpenter. And she says, what the church should be telling him, this carpenter, is this: that the very first demand that his religion makes upon him is that he should make good tables. And so what Sayers was saying is the way that we serve other people, the way that we worship and honor God through our work, is that when we do our work with excellence, when we do an amazing job, because when we do this in our work, when we provide amazing service, when we produce an incredible product, when we just kill that exam, when we write that extraordinary paper, when we love and lead our children well, and we lead the teams that we've been given, the people that we oversee with courage and humility, we're able to worship and honor God by using the gifts that God has given us, the skills and abilities that He's given us. But at the same time, we're also able to serve the people around us and the world around us by giving them something beautiful and something excellent that ultimately points them towards God. And somebody who has been able to do this is a judge in Ohio named Paul Herbert. And just to give you parents a heads up who have any young children here, we've rated this video PG-13 because there is some mature content in regards to sex trafficking as well as elements of abuse. And so if you do not want your children to see this, now would be a great time to exit. But he is a judge in Columbus, Ohio, probably a Buckeyes fan, and so let's try to get past that and really try to embrace the story today. But through his work, he's been able to do what we've been talking about today. And while we're watching the video, we're also going to be receiving our offering. And so ushers, I want to invite you to come forward to do that now. And if this is your first time here, please do not feel any obligation to give. We're just thrilled that you're here. But what we'd love for you to do instead is that afterwards, out in the lobby, to drop by the hub. And we'd love to get to know you, answer any questions that you may have. And if you're somebody who does give, whether it's here or online, we want to say thank you for catching the vision of what God is doing in and through our community. So let's check out this story.
I was a prostitute. It wasn't just feeling trapped, I was trapped.
Girls get raped out there, beat up, held hostage.
Overnight, you're owned by somebody.
Them 4 years was hell.
I was in this hotel for like 2 years straight. I mean, like, they would bring you your food, they would give you your drinks, they would give you your drugs. You gotta sleep with who they tell you to.
You pray and wish that you could be done with this lifestyle.
When we would sit there and talk about, hey, you know, how are we gonna get out of this? Well, you can call the police. Well, you gotta think, we're doing dates with police officers, with detectives. We're doing dates with them. I never felt safe. I never thought I could turn to them for nothing.
I've had the real type of the law that's supposed to help you and then the type of the law that's used you. So it was hard to trust them. You know, an officer rolls up on you, you don't know what's gonna happen. You don't know if he's gonna force you to do something or if he's there to actually help you.
It's really traumatic, like it's horrible. I wouldn't wish that lifestyle on nobody. Nobody.
The police were bringing me search warrants on human trafficking cases. And the prosecutor started showing me all the pictures and bringing the victims up with the bright red rings around their neck from fresh choking, hair pulled out, fresh burn marks where the guy had burned a cigarette in their skin just to torture them. And as this was going on, the sheriff brought the next defendant out on the wall, and I looked over, and that's when I saw a woman who looked just like one of these victims. She had that same aura about her. And so I looked down at the file and saw a prostitute. And I thought, we ought to start looking at the person that we're arresting for prostitution more like she's a victim of human trafficking. Just prior to this event, I was trying to teach my daughters the book, The Purpose-Driven Life. So my one little daughter, she said, hey, Dad, you're doing really good teaching us about this purpose in life, but what's your purpose in life? And I was like, oh man, it just got me right there. So that night I just went upstairs and said a quick prayer. I said, you know I've got this really interesting job. So I said, if there's any way you could show me how to be significant in my work, I'd appreciate that. Then things started to happen very rapidly. I started researching and I found some amazing truths that totally blew my mind away. 1,500 women charged with prostitution a year coming through Columbus. Women who are involved in prostitution reoffend 80% of the time. So that's the revolving door syndrome. The average age of the first sexual abuse is 8 years old. 96% of them are runaways before they become involved in prostitution. 62% of all women enter prostitution before they're 18 years old. I couldn't believe that people were taking advantage of our women and girls and other vulnerable people in Columbus in such a horrible way. So we started a court in 2009 to allow them to exit this deadly lifestyle. Okay, so Ashley, way to go. This is Changing Actions to Change Habits certified. So Ashley Martin has graduated to phase 2 of the Catch program on May 10th. CATCH stands for Changing Actions to Change Habits because we ask women to change everything about their lives. CATCH Court is a 2-year intensive probation. They have individual counseling as well as group sessions.
That's kind of hard for me.
Okay, I know how you feel because you know I came from married. I spent most of my time surrounded by other women, even though I have my own home. Like, it's like a legit sisterhood community. It's amazing.
These women have multiple complex trauma. That's at the core of their issue. And when you know how to engage them with trauma-informed approach, they will respond. So instead of saying, what's wrong with you, I learned to say, I wonder what happened to you. All right, Tina. Hi, how many days do you have?
208.
Wow, Tina. All right, so where you at with that GED?
I had your fractions.
Oh my God, are you kidding me? The statistics that we're now able to share, that if you spend 6 months or more in the program, 62% of these women never get arrested again. And if you graduate from the program, it's a high 90 percentile, never get arrested again. I think you can say it saves money. It saves police time, it saves court time. But for me, that's not where I consider the success. When I see multi-generational healing from parents to children and the women getting their children back and how important that is to those children, that's what makes it worth it to me.
If it wasn't for CATCH Court, I would be back out on the street.
It saved my life.
They gave me my life back. They gave me a second chance.
I have a home that I can actually call mine. I have a 1-year-old daughter. I got custody of my 14-year-old twins back.
My grandbabies and my kids. To be a part of their lives again, it's a wonderful.
I could be a good example for my kids. And my daughter will never see me the way my sons did.
I may not have been a good mom, but I'm one heck of a grandma.
This has been the best thing that's happened in my career and maybe my life. And now I can look my daughter in the eye and say, hey, now we know what Dad's purpose was, don't we?
And so he's an example of someone who, through being excellent in his work, has done what we've been talking about today. He's been able to serve other people. And he's not only been able to serve and impact these women, but also their children, their grandchildren, and undoubtedly generations after them as well. Through his work, he has been able to change the trajectory of entire families. But also through his work, he's been able to worship and honor God, not only by using the skills and abilities that God has given him, but by living the way that God tells us to live, by loving his neighbor and also being a person who carries out justice in this world. Powerful, powerful thing. And this is not something that you have to be a judge to do, or it depends upon your profession. You can do this in whatever line of work that you're in. And I was talking to somebody just in between, after the first service and before this one, and he is a sales director at a cemetery. And he said that I have found such incredible purpose and meaning and dignity in my work, because I've been trying to do exactly what you talked about today. Doesn't matter what you do, doesn't matter how much you get paid, where you work, who you work with. We can do this. And we can carry out God's purposes for our work. And if you're a Jesus follower, as I was watching this video earlier this week, it also reminded me of the fact that if you're a Jesus follower and you want to communicate Jesus to the people in your workplace, you don't always have to use words. You don't always have to put a Bible on your desk and hope that it's a conversation starter. You don't have to hang a cross at your cubicle. And although there's nothing wrong with any of those things, but another way that you can powerfully communicate Jesus to the people in your workplace is through being excellent at what you do. By going the extra mile, every single time putting in maximum effort, being a person of integrity and loving and serving the people around you, because when you do, people will notice. That professor noticed that flight attendant because she was excellent at what she did. And Simon Sinek says something very, very powerful. And that he says concerning our work, your work is your own private megaphone to tell the world what you believe. And that when we work in a different way, when we don't simply set the bar here, but rather way up here, we communicate to the people around us. This is who we follow, this is who we love, this is who we believe in, and this is why we work in this manner. And we're gonna sing a song called Build My Life. And what this song tells us is that for every single one of us, we build our lives on something. And when that foundation isn't Jesus, what ultimately will happen is that it will crack and crumble, because Jesus is the only firm foundation. And my hope as we sing this song is that when it comes to our work life, that we wouldn't build that on the pursuit of success, fame, money, comfort, whatever it may be, but that we would choose to build it on Jesus. So let's sing this out together.
You know it, sing it out. Worthy of every song we could ever sing, worthy of all the praise we could ever bring, worthy of every breath we could ever breathe. We live for you, we live for you. Jesus,
Jesus, the name above every other name. Jesus, the only one who could ever save. Worthy of every breath we could ever breathe. We live for you, oh, we live for you. Sing holy, holy, there is no one like you. There is none beside you. Open up my eyes in wonder. Show me who you are and fill me with your heart and lead me in your love to those around me. Oh, sing worthy, worthy of every song we could ever sing. Worthy of all the praise we could ever bring. Worthy of every breath that we could ever breathe. We live for you, oh, we live for you. Sing Jesus, Jesus, the name above every other name. Jesus, the only one who could ever save. Worthy, worthy of every breath that we could ever breathe. We live for you, yes we do. We live for you. Every voice sing holy, holy, there is no one like you. There is none besides you. Open up my eyes in wonder. Show me who you are and fill me with your heart and lead me in your love to those around. Sing holy, holy, there is no one like you. There is none beside you. Open up my eyes in wonder. Show me who you are and fill me with your heart and lead me in your love to those around. Oh, we put our trust in you, Jesus. So we say together, sing, I will build my life. I will build my life upon your love. It is a firm foundation, and I will put my trust in you alone, and I will not be shaken. I will build my life upon your love. It is a firm and I will put my trust. I will put my trust in you alone, and I will not sing. I will build my life. I will build my life upon your love. It is a firm and I will put my trust in you
just the voices sing, holy, holy. There is no one like you. There is none beside you. Open up my eyes and show me who you are, and fill me with your heart and lead me in your love to those around me. You know, Michael and I were talking on yesterday as we were preparing for the service. And we're talking about the song that we just sang that simply just says that God is worthy. He is worthy of everything. Every breath we give belongs to Him. And even when things in our lives get tough, even when we are in our jobs at work and things get extremely hard, we will put our trust in Jesus Christ, not because of what He's done, but because He is worthy. Amen. And this next song that we're going to sing just a little piece of, I want to invite you all to stand. It simply says, this is how I fight my battles. I know for me personally at work, there are times where situations arise where I'm like, my goodness, I am just going to punch the clock, go home to my family, and that's it. But then I have to remember that I serve a God that is with me always and that surrounds me in everything that I do. Isn't that good news to know that we have a God that is with us always? Come on, somebody. I need somebody to be a little more happy about that. We have a God that loves us so much that He is with us even when it gets tough. So this is a simple song. If you don't know it, you'll catch it real quick. So sing this out. It goes like this. This is how I fight my battles. Sing it out. This is how I fight my battles. Whoa. This is how I fight my battles. Yes, it is. Yeah. This is how I fight my battles. Whoa. This is how I fight my battles. Yeah. This is how I fight my battles. One more time. This is how I fight my battles. Oh, this is how I fight my battles. Sing it out. It may look like I'm surrounded, but I'm surrounded by you. Oh, yeah. It may look like I'm surrounded, but I'm surrounded by you. Yeah. It may look like I'm surrounded, but I'm surrounded by you. It may look like I'm surrounded, but I'm surrounded. Sing, this is how, because this is how I fight my battles. 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 It may look like I'm surrounded, but I'm surrounded by you. It may look like I'm surrounded, but I'm surrounded by you. It may look like I'm surrounded, but I'm surrounded by you. It may look like I'm surrounded, but I'm surrounded by you. 'Cause this is how I fight my battles. 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 Oh, this is how I fight my battles. Every voice, this is how I fight my battles. Yeah, this is how I fight my battles. This is how I fight my battles. Come on, sing it out.
fight my battle. This is how I fight my battle. This is how I fight my battle. Yeah. So it may look like I'm surrounded, but I'm surrounded by you. Yes. It may look like I'm surrounded, but I'm surrounded by you. It may look like I'm surrounded, but I'm surrounded by you. One more time. It may look like I'm surrounded, but I'm surrounded by you. 'Cause this is how I fight my battles. 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 Come on, give it up for Jesus.
So God, we thank you. We thank you for our work. We thank you that you tell us that it's a gift and it is good, but as we all know, sometimes it doesn't feel like that, especially when we have to deal with difficult situations and difficult people. And during those times, we pray that you would remind us of what we just sang, that we are surrounded by you, that you are with us, and that you would remind us and that you would give us everything we need to do what we talked about today in and through our work. To recognize that it is good, but also through it to serve others and to worship and honor you. So that we thank you for this gift, and we pray these things in your Son's name. Amen. And so we'd love for you to drop by the hub outside, jump into our group. If any of you would like to receive prayer, our prayer team will be up front. Thanks so much for coming, everyone. Have a great, great rest of your weekend.